Hello, this is Ken Stuzen. I'm a partner at Brown Advisory. Welcome to the Now Podcast. Now stands for navigating our world. Through these discussions, we try to understand the world better, to navigate some of the most pressing questions that are shaping our lives, our culture, and our investment challenges. Artificial intelligence, quantum computing, autonomy, the technology inflection point, one that will transform so many aspects of our world, including the way we go to war. The U.S. military is in a race to adapt and adopt these new technologies, before, frankly, our enemies do. This means figuring out how to transfer them from the innovation ecosystem into the hands of our warfighters. Meanwhile, the military's R&D system must come to terms with the innovation cycles, rapid deployment, experimentation, and agility that characterize software development and new defense technologies. In our next episode, which was recorded live at our Now conference in Austin, Texas, Brown Advisory's Brett Gibson sat down with the Honorable Christine Fox and Dr. Casey Perley to examine how the military is harnessing breakthrough technologies to bolster national security and foster a safer world. We hope you enjoy their conversation.
We all here care about the safety and future of our world, and that's what we're here to talk about. Brown Advisory exists to help our clients make sense of the world, help our clients take a stake in its future, and so today we're going to ask Casey and Christine to help us with that. The last conversation was really about national security threats, and now we're going to talk about putting a lens over those threats using technology and innovation, and how do we approach conflict in this next decade, in this next several decades. And thinking about technology, we think about the assets that our country has here and that the allies have that we just talked about. We have this incredible entrepreneurial ecosystem that we're here to celebrate here in Austin. We have somewhat frictionless, or at least as frictionless as we hope possible, access to capital markets. We also have this deep bench of technology talent. Many of you here in the room are entrepreneurs, you're technologists, you're innovators, you're scientists, you're mathematicians. You're here thinking about how do we help apply what you've learned to our national security. But what's clear based on that last conversation is that the future of warfare will really look very different, and maybe more of a race to who has the most advanced technology, less who can deploy tanks the quickest or who has jets that fly the fastest. It may be more about who has the most advanced technology. How do we procure that technology and get that technology through the Pentagon and into the hands of the warfighter? So that's what we're going to talk about with Dr. Casey Perley. Dr. Casey Perley is the head of the Army Applications Lab here in Austin, Texas. We also wish you and your family a post-Happy Veterans Day. Her husband is an Army veteran. We also have the Honorable Christine Fox. They've both given me permission to name them by their first names, but they're due the respect that they have. Christine Fox was the Deputy Secretary of Defense under 3 U.S. Secretaries of Defense. She's the highest-ranking woman ever at the Pentagon. She's also on our board at Brown Advisory, which we feel so incredibly grateful for the insights that she brings from her experiences into how we think about our business. So we're going to really focus in on for the next 30 minutes on how do we get this incredible technology from the innovation ecosystem that we have here in the U.S. into the hands of our warfighters, of our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, Space Force, Coast Guardsmen. How do we get that technology into the hands of those people that are deployed to keep our globe safe? So with that, let's go jump right in. Christine, I'd love to ask you the first question. Of the things you're seeing now, and you sit on boards of private companies, you've held these senior positions at the Pentagon, what technologies are you seeing right now that give you some hope in terms of giving us a leap forward in national security? What military tools are out there that encourage you?
Thank you, Brett, and thank you all. It's a great honor to be here at the Now conference. So I am not going to surprise anyone in this room, I am sure, when I say it's artificial intelligence and autonomy and the combination of the two. And there's some version of just software in general that has to be in that mix. I mean, we just heard an incredibly motivating panel. If anybody thought, well, everything's fine in the world, just, replay the panel that we just heard, because it's a very complicated and actually, I think, increasingly dangerous world. And these technologies have the potential to help us make decisions faster in the military, be more rapidly responsive, and also to scale. We heard we're going to have and face controversies, conflicts, crises globally now. So we have to be even more than usual everywhere at once. We struggle to do that now. We're going to need the ability to field quickly a lot of different capabilities. And I think autonomy helps us do that. AI helps us use it effectively and make decisions faster. So that's what I would say.
So AI and autonomy. So Casey, what are you seeing come through the pipeline at AAL?
So I'm going to say, I'm going to riff off autonomy a little bit and go robotic systems.
Yeah.
When you think through the last couple of decades in American industry, we have seen a rise of automated systems that don't just speed things up, but that reduce risk to the workforce. I'm really interested to see how we can use those systems or similar systems and reduce risk to our soldier. General Rainey, the commanding general of AFC, has a phrase that he no longer wants to trade blood for first contact. So how can I leverage autonomous systems to breach a minefield, cross a river under enemy fire, and do some of those riskiest things that we ask our infantry squads to do?
And have you seen, for either of you, have you seen the practical application yet of these technologies? Maybe put it into context of what we just heard from Robin and Emily. In Ukraine, certainly we're seeing deployment of drones and autonomous platforms that have allowed, an asymmetrically smaller force to take on a larger force. But have you seen either AI, autonomy, or robotics come through in the battlefield?
Yes, absolutely. I think the operating forces are very anxiously hungering for these technologies. They're starting to experiment with them. I've seen artificial intelligence and software and data being used to actually accelerate the speed of decision making in the tactical level, very, very importantly. And I think that the inclusion of autonomy across all the services is making a real difference in places like the Gulf, where we need to be able to. Task Force 59 is a group that in the US Navy was told, we still want you to know everything that's going on here in the Persian Gulf region, but we're going to take your ships and assets and we're going to move them to the Indo-Pacific. But no change in the mission, thank you very much. So they said, we better get smart. And so they went ahead and they actually worked with commercial to bring in autonomous systems and started to work on how to do that mission in that way differently than they have in the past. What have you seen?
So obviously war in Ukraine, I think it's no news to anyone in this room, the unmanned aerial systems, what those are doing both in terms of reconnaissance, understanding where enemies are to better direct fire, as well as using them as attack munitions as well. And one of the things that's really cool, I think, about the way the Ukrainian army has done this is that they have created very fast iterative development cycles with industry.
Absolutely.
Those companies are getting feedback multiple times a week, rapidly actioning it, sending better products out, and that relationship is continuing. There are units in the US Army that are starting to experiment with this, both in terms of working with industry and building it in-house in their own makerspace. And there was recently a great article, I think in Defense News, that the 101st Airborne went to one of our national training centers, which is where they fight a US force playing the OPFOR. And they had brought unmanned systems with Raspberry Pis on them that were fake EW emitters to try to make it seem like their main tactical operations center was elsewhere. And they convinced the OPFOR, which are some of the best fighting units in our army, to expend 50% of their artillery shells against a bunch of really cheap UASs with Raspberry Pis, because they fooled them into thinking that tactical operations center was elsewhere. So for me, it's UASs, not just what they can do as munitions, but what they can do for intelligence, electronic warfare, simulation, deception.
So you've described some pretty impressive technology, and for folks that are in the room that aren't as familiar with how this works, how does this really cool sort of razor's edge technology that's being developed at firms like Palantir or other great private sector firms, how does it make it into the hands of people who need it the most? Talk about maybe the military procurement process. What is that process traditionally? How has it evolved? And then I want to hear how AAL approaches it very differently as well. But maybe Christine, start with you.
So sure. So I'm one of those people that does not believe that the defense acquisition process is broken. It's simply not, it's being used across too broad a spectrum of capabilities. So the defense acquisition system was designed to build big things, right? Carriers, submarines, bombers, tanks, big stuff. Stuff that cost a lot of money, that you had to get right, and that took many, many years to develop. Now, could it be better? Could it be faster? Absolutely. That's another conversation we can have, anybody who's interested later. But that's what the defense acquisition system is designed to do. That is very incompatible with what is going on today in the innovation space, where things move very quickly. So let's just take software, for example. The acquisition system has to work across very specific kinds of money named by Congress. And it sounds kind of boring, but it's important to keep in mind. There's a research and development phase, and there's money that Congress appropriates for that. Years later, there's procurement money that Congress appropriates for that. Then you buy some stuff. Years later, Congress appropriates some sustainment money so that you can fix the stuff that you bought. Software doesn't move along that time scale, right? It moves every day. How many times does your iPhone get updated in a week, right? That doesn't work. And so we have to figure out how we can buy software, buy autonomy, buy AI in a way that it's moving is so fast. Just think how quickly generative AI has moved since it was first introduced in a year, right? So we have to figure out how to make the acquisition system built for tanks and carriers now work for something completely different. And that's hard, and that's a work in progress, for sure.
So for us at AAL, we don't buy things. We try to rapidly pivot commercial technology into the DoD and get it to essentially officially a prototype level, something I can give units that they can go experiment with at a training center, or they can take it with them on a rotation to the Indo-Pacific or to Europe, but it's not at that procurement stage yet. We like to do that in under 2 years, which, given that the Army likes to spend 5 to 10 years in that research and development phase, doesn't sound very quick for the commercial sector, but seems very quick inside the DoD. But for us, real success is getting it into the program of record so that, one, the company can get long-term revenue, and two, the Army can get sustained accessibility to that capability. So for us, it's all about aligning stakeholders. Who are the scientists that are going to get asked their opinion of? Who are the people that are going to buy it? In order for somebody to buy it, there has to be an official requirement, which is this telephone book size document, unfortunately. I kid you not. So where are the requirement writers so that we can make sure the requirement matches the capability so that the people can buy it at the end of the day? And we're actively working with the people building the budget so that the money is there to catch the capability. So for us, it's a lot of relationships, influencing without authority to try to demonstrate the value of technology through experimentation, and then have that catcher's mitt on the acquisition side of the house ready to go if and when it succeeds.
Would you say that AAL is working as it was set up to work today?
I think so. About half of our projects move on. And by that I mean remain in use after our projects are done. Now sometimes that's going to a program of record, sometimes that's going directly to units because it is cheap and consumable so the units can buy it. Sometimes that's going to the Air Force because it solves their need better than it solves ours. But for us, yeah, I would say 50% of our projects are moving on. That is both a good success rate, and it shows that all that legwork we do to build the coalition really does help move things on that pathway to soldiers.
And has Christine, you know, we all sat here and just got this sort of circumnavigating the world overview of the different threats. Do you, from your experience, have confidence that the procurement system is set up and is prepared for those different threats in terms of how it adapts what we're learning in the private sector to what's going on in the world?
Short answer, no, I don't. Longer answer, I think it's recognized, and I think it's changing. It's changing too slowly, in my opinion. I think we have more urgency in our need to adopt the innovation and getting it out to the operating forces so that we are prepared to meet the challenges that we know are coming, and also to deter so that we aren't caught off guard, that we have the capabilities. And it's too slow for that. I do think that there are some real glimmers of exciting even progress, where the operating forces are being able to now contract directly, enabled by their parent services or the Office of the Secretary of Defense, to go out directly and contract and bring in the capability they need and use it in their experiments and in their deployments if they face a real crisis. I think that there are elements that have been created. One's called the Defense Innovation Unit, that is designed, built, idea from the very beginning is to connect DoD with commercial capabilities so that it can go faster. But I think we need a faster way to get them into programs of record is one way to do it, but I think there have to be other ways too, because some ways the innovation dies when it hits a program, right? Once it hits a program of record, it's funded and it goes forward in that state. You can build in some upgrades, but the new idea, it's not going to be in that, right? So we have to get more nimble. And so I think we have a lot of work to do.
So you mentioned nimble and fast, which I think is part of the mission that the Army Applications Lab has. So would you say that you've found success with that so far, or what roadblocks are you hitting, or how do you navigate through those roadblocks, Casey?
We hit a lot of the same acquisition roadblocks that you mentioned, right? Because at the end of the day, we don't have procurement authority. I can't sustain anything that we are able to give to a unit. The Army is trying a lot of interesting things, and I'm going to be interested to see in the next 12 to 18 months kind of how they pan out. The first is called transforming in contact. So we have 3 brigades at any time that are our transform in contact brigades. Typically, it is 1 armored, so it has tanks, 1 striker, and light infantry. And they get new kit that nobody else gets. And we're buying 1 to 3 brigade sets worth of this at a time. And then they take it with them and they go. And when the next transform in contact unit comes up, we can see, is that kit working? If it is, maybe we should get it again. Or if it's not, or industry has moved on, well, we're not locked in that big program of record contract. Let's try a new vendor. I think there's a lot of value in that for things that are consumable. So I'm sending them one way, or if I don't get them back, I'm not heartbroken. I think there's a lot of space in that for things that are low cost, where industry is rapidly evolving. So to your point, ma'am, not a carrier, not a tank, but maybe a small UAS or a robot. But culturally, overcoming, the way our acquisition system has typically worked is a challenge even in these areas. So I'm interested to see what we learn from Transform in Contact, what we learn from our iterative fielding of robots to units, and see if there aren't lessons that we can take from that and scale more broadly.
It's a great example of the kinds of new experiments that the department knows it needs to be doing. And so, I think that's a great, exciting example.
I think it's interesting to hear sort of the trade-off that exists between speed and quality. Like, how fast can we get this to the people who need it most versus what quality level is it when it gets there? And it's a trade-off that we face in the business world as well. How do you get things done, but get them done well, I think is an interesting problem. And I didn't say this at the beginning, but I relate to this problem set in a very personal way. I've been in the Army, active and reserves for 22 years. I've served in Iraq and Afghanistan and dealt with this problem as others did in this room. I see other veterans out there that dealt with this challenge of you got this technology fielded to your unit, but maybe you weren't trained on it, or maybe it was still in the box back in the Connex at the Ford operating base, but you're 25 miles north in a Humvee for 2 weeks. And so I think that's how do you deal with that as people who are thinking about this at the most strategic levels, that we want to get this to the front where it's needed, but it has to be fast, but it also has to work, and it also has to people have to know how to use it. And Christine, you've talked about this, about the operational first mentality.
Yeah, so all of the really excellent points you just made are why the current acquisition system is the way it is, right? You have a requirement for something, and you get research and development to get a prototype, and you test it and test it and test it, and you make sure that when you give it to Brett and he's on the front line, it's gonna work exactly like he expects it to work and needs it to work. And that's great, but it takes a long time. And so what I think we're starting to see now, and what my answer to your excellent question is you need to get prototypes like what you're talking about into the hands of the frontline operators faster, as fast as possible, maybe directly, and give them room to experiment with them so they learn right there, and then it goes back. We also need to listen to what's going on. So you mentioned Ukraine. So Ukraine is doing a lot with drones. They're doing a lot with database decision-making and artificial intelligence. And I was at a conference to talk about what they're learning, and the Ukrainians that were there said, turn that AI, expletive deleted, off. It doesn't work, okay? Well, wow, I mean, it's supposed to be the answer to the future. Why are you telling us to turn it off? And so you dig into it, you find lots of reasons why it wasn't trained properly. It's giving them too much information. It wasn't pointed at the right area. Lots of things that can be addressed, but you don't know about it, right? So when you get it in the hands of the operators that are driven with a need is when you learn very rapidly. And the trick is to make sure you catch those lessons. You understand, not in a bureaucratic way where somebody types in a lessons learned and it goes into a big database in the sky, but with people right on scene. I think we're seeing that. The commercial partners that we're starting to build are embedding engineers increasingly with the operating forces to learn those lessons. And I think that is so exciting. I think that's really the future.
And when you mentioned commercial partners, either of you, would love to hear you. On the previous panel, Emily mentioned this No Front Lines organization, which I think piqued a lot of our interest out there. Starlink, different private sector organizations that are working with the military. Talk about how do you partner with the commercial sector, maybe?
So for us, we are a couple years younger than Defense Innovation Unit, which you mentioned, but we're all on the same floor of Capital Factory. So DIU's there, AFWorks, which is the Air Force Innovation Unit, Naval X, there's a host of others. And we're all about how do you ensure commercial companies that are maybe not even considering working with the DoD find out about opportunities to come work with us, and then how do we systemically break down the barriers. So for us, a lot of that is, we do not talk in jargon. If I'm going to ask you to automate a process, for example, so I'll tell a little story really quick. One of our early projects was building an autoloader for field artillery.
What now?
An autoloader.
Great.
So if you're thinking to yourself, non-traditional industry is going to automate loading a weapon system, are you crazy? Our theory was a lot of people had automated processes for like Yoplait and Frito-Lay assembly lines. And on the face of it, it wasn't that different, except instead of filling bags of chips, I would like you to put an artillery shell in the breech of a gun. But the first thing we did is we never called it an autoloader. We said, I want to automate a process. So suddenly those companies are thinking, oh, that's what I do, I can do it. And the next thing we knew is that most of these guys weren't going to have field artillerists on staff. So we got permission to put one engineer from each company inside a field artillery piece, close the door, and have a soldier fire, so that they understood what shock and vibration meant more than any amount of, metaphorically screaming at them shock and vibration was going to do. It radically changed every single one of their designs. But the point to that is you have to figure out what are the barriers that these companies have, whether it be more bureaucratically with how do I file for these types of accounting system audits, Or what are the gaps in their knowledge? Who do they not know they need to talk to? And fill those in. And that's really what we try to do.
Yes, so I think all of that is great. And after Russia invaded Ukraine and Starlink got turned on a text, right, and all the companies started participating, a colleague of mine, Emily Probasco at CSET, which is the Center for Security and Emerging Technology at Georgetown, and I put together a workshop where we brought in senior people from various tech companies, from startups to Palantir, Google was there, Microsoft, and some former government people. And the conversation was, this is exciting, what does it mean for the future? And the thing, and it was echoed in the previous panel too, is that, hey, Ukraine is clear. It's absolutely clear. Taiwan, well, that's a harder thing. But what came out of that conversation is that every company that starts to work in the national security space, whether it's DoD or the IC, needs to step back before the opportunity is upon them and do what my friend Emmy and I coined a North Star document. A North Star conversation with employees and investors and shareholders of what will we do with our technology, who will we sell it to, under what circumstances and how. Only then can DoD have confidence they'll be there, and only then will they be able to actually decide what's going to be their market. What are they going to do if China invades Taiwan? What is their vulnerability in that situation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I thought those comments were fabulous. I'm happy to hear CSIS is going to do a bigger study, because as we go down this path, we are going in the DoD to be increasingly dependent on a much broader set of commercial technology. We're already dependent on the defense industrial base, okay? And you could argue that that's not ready to scale based on a lot of decisions we've made in the past. So we're expanding, and I think that's great, but we ought to do it purposefully on both sides.
So it's fascinating. You mentioned the defense industrial base there, and Emily mentioned that previously. Talk about, everything we've talked about requires people, and there's a war for talent. Brown Advisory is in a war for talent. We want the best people to help our clients who are the best people. The Pentagon wants the best people. Silicon Valley wants the best people. Does the Pentagon, and maybe Dr. Perley, if you could just comment on your experience with the military and the DoD, talk about the workforce in the Pentagon. Do we have the right people in the right seats? Do they have the right data? How do we get them there if they're not there now?
So I'll start from my kind of little foxhole at AAL. We have 2 of the 10 entrepreneurs in residence in the Army. So we have a very unique workforce. We have a commercial team that does very deep due diligence to make sure companies have not unknowingly, in a lot of cases, taken money from someone that has ties to a maligned actor. They did not think that was the case, you know. So a lot of the skill sets I need, some of them are available in the DoD, some of them are available in the commercial space, like project managers, scientists. I can find those in both places. But I have a real niche capability for communication to non-traditional industry in a comm space, and my corporate team, that there is no path for growing in the DoD right now. And these are conversations I have with DIU and AFWorks and NavalX all the time about how do we start to grow the workforce we need, because those skills they're needed beyond AAL in those organizations.
Yeah, no, I think growing the workforce is really important. And it's even more complicated. So we need tech-savvy operators. But in today's world, the world that we're talking about, you need something that we've coined trilingual leaders: technology, operations, and acquisition. Because if you are an operator and you want to play in this world we're describing, you need to know how to get access to the right technology in the commercial sector and not, have to talk to the inspector general. And that means you need some acquisition background and ability to know how to work within. Because there's actually a lot of flexibility, but it's so complicated, it's hard to know that. I know of 2 trilingual leaders in the past 10 years, right, that were in the Defense Department. I'm sure there are more, but they don't grow on trees. And we have not today valued all 3 of those as much as we need to today. And so, yes, building that is critically important. And again, I think it's opportunities for operators to work with technologists. You're bringing engineers in and locking them in a room. The embedded engineers I see at the 18th Airborne Corps when they're doing an exercise and experimenting with artificial intelligence. This is the way, because the operators, they learn so much from that. The engineers learn too, and they give better products. So partnership is a key to it.
Elaborate a little bit on that. You mentioned that earlier, the 18th Airborne Corps, kind of what work you're doing with them. Who are they, for those in the room that aren't familiar, and
Sure.
why is it important?
The 18th Airborne Corps is part of the Army. They're kind of a crisis flyaway team. They handled the withdrawal from Afghanistan out of Kabul. They were the first to go to Europe when Russia invaded Ukraine. And they have put together an exercise series called Scarlet Dragon. Scarlet Dragon is a fascinating thing where they build what we're calling a tech sandbox. They invite companies to come in. They tell them their needs. They come in on their own dime, right? Internal research money. They come in and they show their stuff. They get evaluated in a 90-day cycle. After that, they get a 3-month contract. It's not a long contract, right? A 3-month contract. They use that contract to do some work in their focus area is what's called fires, which is where you identify targets and then apply weapons against them. So the ability to do that, and their goal was 1,000 decisions an hour, 1,000 decisions an hour, 1,000 targets an hour, right? And so they have actually put that together. They've had space companies, software companies, artificial intelligence algorithms, communications, and then they took the best of that, they refined their processes, and then they deploy with it. And they partner with the engineers that they pick to go with them often so that they are able to, on the fly, update the technology that they've built to the needs of the day. I mean, this is great. They are, in my opinion, way out in front, and it's starting to go through the rest of the department. But the problem with this is scale. Right? This is a particular unit doing particular things. In some ways, you struggle with this too, right? Yep. You're a particular group doing particular really cool things. We got to figure out how to then rapidly grab it and get it out to everybody, including our allies and partners, because as has already been said, we can't do this alone.
If I can just point out something really interesting you said, because I think it's important. When they're picking the capabilities, they're picking multiple companies. So often in the history of defense acquisition, we pick one company. That company does some things really great, some things passably well, and we just go with it. By putting together 4, 6, 8, what we like to call cohorts of companies, you can get best in breed across the board. It's something we do when we solve complicated problems. 18th Airborne Corps uses it. I'm seeing it spread a little bit through the department, and I think it's such a powerful approach that we need to leverage more often.
It's interesting, too, that these companies that are working with the 18th Airborne Corps work in these 3-month work spurts. You know, that's a very short period of time. How do you think about timetables for return on investment? You know, and it's different than what a lot of the investors in the room here think about return on investment in the long-term context. What's your timetable for return on investment?
I think you need to define what return on investment means. I mean, for me, it means getting capability to soldiers. But I know for all of you in this room, it is probably getting your money back and ideally 10xing it or 100xing it. And in order to do that, even getting a brigade set worth, even working with 18th Airborne and Scarlet Dragon, you're not going to do that. You really need to get into that program of record type vein. And I'm going to be honest, that's going to be 5 to 7 years to get that procurement contract. Because even when you're done with an organization like AAL that accelerates you, or 18th Airborne Corps that accelerates you, you know, software, it's a little bit different, but hardware, you cannot short circuit your testing still. We might try to do that testing in theater now, so you're with a unit and you're getting feedback, but we've still got to go through that. And you still got to go through that procurement process to get that final contract. I would love to see a day when it is shorter, But at least now when we talk with investors that are considering investing in a company that AAL is working with, we try to set 5 to 7 years as that expectation.
But we got to make it shorter.
We got to make it shorter.
Make it shorter,
100%. We're just not there yet.
I agree.
But the timetable, for instance, on a project like the B-21 bomber, that Christine, you were there at the inception of that development.
So that was super fast, 12
Really?
years.
12 years.
No, I'm not kidding
really
though.
fast.
From the year that Secretary Gates sent the letter to the Secretary of the Air Force, this is what the bomber is, I want it to be, till it first flew, was 12 years. And that is record fast for a program as large as a bomber. That's about as good as you're going to do with a big bomber-like thing. Now, that it cannot be right for software. Cannot. Just different things. We need completely different processes, and that's what we've got to figure out.
Completely humbled that we're here listening to someone who helped develop the B-21 bomber, by the way. Saved hundreds of thousands of lives in conflict situations. We're going to bring it in for landing here with a final question on the investment topic. There's a room full of investors here that are all interested in kind of a hot take from people that have the most experience in the room. So if you could choose one innovative technology that has the highest potential for return on investment for our national security success, what would it be?
So I'll go. I already said AI and autonomy. I think those are going. I think the one thing that is being neglected is compute, the power to compute. We're going to get to a place where we've got 18th Airborne Corps doing artificial intelligence to make fires decisions, and they deploy and they put on their computers and they get the spinning wheel of death, right? Not good. We have to support the infrastructure. And we're not talking a small bill. Let's face it, Microsoft is restarting 3 Mile Island for themselves, right? So this is a big idea. And in DoD, I don't think we're investing in compute. I think that at least not nearly as much as we need to. And what does that even look like? How do you partner with commercial there? I don't have answers to that, but we need answers to that. And I think that is not getting the same attention that some of the other cool technologies are that we've been talking about.
So I'm going to say something similar. I'm going to say AI for command and control, which you talked a lot about. Compute is a part of that. But at least in the Army, we need it to be less stovepiped and a whole lot easier to talk, not just between units or up and down within a unit, but across the stovepipes that exist within our warfighting functions. Like right now, it's really hard for sustainment to see fires data, and it's hard for medical to see other types of data that they really need. And we need a system that is flexible enough that it can be updated on the fly, or when there's a really new, cool innovation, either a soldier makes it or commercial industry makes it, we can adapt it quickly. This type of technology has a lot of applicability in the commercial sector as well, so I'm not going back on what I said, and you need to have a strong dual-use path or a lot of VC investment. That's a huge priority for Army Futures Command, and it's something we're always actively on the lookout for.
Well, I think with that, you've helped us end this morning session or early afternoon session on a high note. It also reminds me of where we left off back in San Francisco with our last NOW conference with Mark Andreessen, sort of reflecting with Elise Liberto, who's one of our partners that focuses on venture, that every entrepreneur in the future is going to have an AI for general counsel in their pocket, or an AI for their accounting function in their pocket. And I think what you've just left us with is thinking about how every soldier, airman, or Marine is going to have AI for military intelligence in their pocket at their disposal, or AI for compute, and just how fascinating and quickly changing this world is, and how it's going to affect the future of warfare, but also statecraft. So I think we started with a sober and sort of serious account of the threats this morning, and I think now we're ending on a slightly optimistic note for what could come in the future if we apply this technology and innovation. So Christine, Casey, thank you both so much. Let's give them a round of applause.
Thank you.
Hello, this is Ken Stuzen. Thank you for joining us as we seek out insights that help us better understand our rapidly changing world. We hope you'll tune in for our next Now episode. Until then, be well and stay safe.